Awesome. Welcome, guys. Thanks for attending my talk. I know it's quick after lunch there. So the talk is on cloud warehouse migrations. So hopefully you're in the right one, track 3. Yeah, let's kick it off. So first, who am I? What do I know about doing cloud warehouse migrations, and how can I help your organization? So I'm Ross Stuart. I'm with a Vertical Trail Consulting Company out of Chicago. I've been working in AWS and cloud in general for about 5 years, since 2014. I hold 8 active AWS certifications. They're all listed there. I think it just means I have way too much time on my hands. But as well as Google Cloud, the professional data engineer, and the cloud architect. As well as the Cloud Analytics Academy. It's essentially a Snowflake certification for more cloud agnostic data warehousing. I've helped multiple Fortune 200 companies migrate their data warehouses and data in general to the cloud. And I'm an avid beer connoisseur. So if you're sticking around for the happy hour and you have questions for me, whether it be on certification or beer in general, stop me and we can chat for sure. So why migrate to the cloud? Hopefully that's why you're all here. Hopefully you guys understand the benefits that migrating your warehouse to the cloud can offer. So, but we'll talk about a few here. The number one reason we see companies moving to the cloud, their warehouses to the cloud, is costs. They're tired of paying, Teradata, Oracle, etc., tons of money, and their whole organization's already moving to the cloud. Licensing, standard ways of paying of just a flat rate for servers and for licensing. They want to stop managing hardware. And the same reason we're going to the cloud is we don't want to manage hardware, software. We don't want to do patching. We don't want to pay people to do that. The cloud offers new pricing models. You can have a platform as a service. You can use serverless and only pay for computing, and just the storage in general. So you're not having to have a tightly coupled and scale by steps, by quarter racks, by full racks, to just pay per gigabyte. And if you don't query the data, you don't have to pay any more than that. And there is multiple different pricing models, so it really depends on the solution you use. But we have found it to be far cheaper, sub $1,000 per terabyte in the cloud versus on-prem. You can't match that price. Another big reason is you're using services that are in the cloud. There's a lot of latency between your data centers and AWS, for instance. Is if your application or data is there. If your application's there, your data should be there as well to make it more efficient for your applications. There's multiple reasons, but independent scalability, not having to scale the quarter rack, the half rack. But if you want to have more computing power to be able to run your end of month reporting, to be able to do that and not have to have your 100% peak always in your data center. And this can enable things like data exploration, testing. You don't have to tell your analysts, don't run reports right now. We need to get these reports out to management this morning. And new capabilities, being able to support structured, unstructured, semi-structured data, whereas your database and your data center might not support that, or might be too costly to put in data that might not be super high value to you. So those are just a few reasons. There's plenty more for sure. As well as if you guys have questions, there'll be time after this, but feel free to stop me and we can dive deeper, or I can explain something more. So what do I need to consider? Just for a quick show of hands here, who actually has migrated their data warehouse to the cloud? Okay, we got one. So maybe he should give the talk after this. Who here is looking at it, started migrating, just considering it? Okay, awesome. So we got the right crowd in the room. So the first thing to do is look at your current warehouse. Really need to take a look at what you currently have and see how that will look when you move to the cloud. Is most of your usage scheduled, where most it's just reporting and scheduled jobs throughout the day, or is it a lot of ad hoc analysis? Do you have a lot of data analysts that are running queries throughout the day, doing different testing, and that changes your load throughout the day a lot? Do you have even workloads, or does most of your jobs run overnight and then come 8 a.m. it's pretty low on utilization? Things like scale are really important. As you get to larger scale, it makes more of a difference, to say the least. Are we looking at tens of gigabytes? Can we just run this on a MySQL database like you're doing right now on-prem? If that's the case, you can probably do something similar in the cloud and make an easy migration where, MySQL to MySQL or Postgres, etc. We're talking about terabytes, tens of terabytes. This is really going to go past what a traditional MySQL instance or RDS, for instance, would be made to handle. And Redshifts a great example. It's probably the most used data warehousing software in the world right now today. And I think that's even quoted in the most recent Gartner report. When you get to the petabytes, that's really when things get really important. We've seen people really leverage Snowflake benefit there a lot. I know things are changing all the time. At Redshift, they say they can handle that. We've seen issues with Redshift concurrency at scale, but that's when it really makes a difference to make sure you plan this right. Inconsistent usage. So things like when you have huge variability in usage of your cluster, you really need to start with a cloud warehouse that can scale independently and can match the usage you're going for. On-premise traditional warehouses, to be able to buy hardware for peak at all the time is going to be very costly, versus if you use something like a Snowflake that can really have as much data as you want and you only pay for the processing, and you can scale that down throughout the day, throughout the month, depending on your usage, you'll get huge benefits from. And then what are your current frustrations? What is plaguing you today in your current warehouse? Is it not having enough scale? Is it cost? Is it not having the capabilities, or not being able? It's too expensive to bring in the data sets you want. Look at those things and what we can do in the cloud to get past that. So level of effort. What's the timelines look like? What is management willing to pay for? Are you under tight timelines and don't want to your hardware is getting end of support, and you just need to get off it within 8 months? Or are you really looking to make a transformation when you move to AWS or the cloud in general to get the most benefit? You're looking to enable new capabilities, and you really need to re-architect your entire warehouse to take advantage of that? Are you looking to get off some other legacy software at the same time? Are you matching your changing ETL tools as well as to a different target warehouse? Or are you just going from MySQL on-prem to MySQL in the cloud? Those are all going to be big differences when you go to the cloud. I mean, obviously, doing MySQL to MySQL is going to be very simple. If you go from a proprietary warehouse to proprietary warehouse, it might be a little more effort. Or if you're going from a traditional relational system to like a data lake, for instance, it's going to change a lot. So you have lots of options when you move to the cloud. One thing we've definitely seen is going from ETL to ELT. If you're doing a lot of your transformations in a tool today, but want to do it all in the warehouse going forward, you can cut out that system. Just have to do a lot of work to rewrite a lot of your code. Are you going to move from a star schema to a flat table? We've seen a lot of benefits from getting rid of all your lookups to just combine it all into one table. You might have some duplicate data for sure, but the performance of the application using it can often be a great improvement. The big thing we've seen was starting out small with a phased approach, a small team, a small use case, and grow bigger from there. Start with one application, one table, slowly test it, and you'll get a lot of lessons learned along the way, and in documenting those, and then bring in more people, more data, more applications, and it can really accelerate things. So what are my options in the cloud? First, I want to kind of define a couple terms I know I've used throughout the day already. So a data lake. What is it? What does a data lake mean to you? To me, I think of it as unstructured data. It could be structured, it could be semi-structured, but a data lake, that's one of the biggest differences between a data lake and a data warehouse, I'd say. It's schema on read, so you can dump whatever data you want in your data lake, whether it be weather data. It doesn't have to be your traditional CSV type data. It could be JPEGs, it could be videos, it could be anything. And you just have to figure out when you want to utilize it, how to put schema around it in whatever querying format you want. It could have unknown data value. We have this weather data. We think it could be useful. We could never support that in a traditional warehouse. The value of the data has to be so high to match the storage costs of the platform. Usage can change a lot too. So for data lake, it could be a lot of data exploration, querying it, understanding what it looks like, and where the value is. And some of the people that would utilize the data lake might be data scientists, for instance, whether it be in like a structured query language, SQL, or other tools like Python and with Spark, etc. So with your warehouse, it's going to be very structured. It's going to be relational. It's going to be indexed, and it's going to be very cleaned. So you're going to have schema on write. So when you're writing the data to your warehouse, you're going to know the format it's in, and it's going to be a known pattern throughout. It's going to be very high value. So like we said, it's going to very possibly be over $1,000 per terabyte. So you're going to definitely want to know the data and the value to the organization. And it's going to be index and performant queries. So you're going to understand the SKU, you're going to understand the keys, the foreign keys, and how to properly query it. It's going to be often used for reporting, KPIs, things that the organization needs and expects on a day-to-day basis. And your typical users, being reports, but also data analysts, pulling up new reports for the company, and gathering new KPIs. So single cloud versus multi-cloud. This is often an organizational decision, whether they want to be stuck with one vendor or leveraging multiple vendors, but it does make a difference to your decision in the cloud. Things to worry about when considering multi-cloud or single cloud is vendor lock-in, as well as the database. Do you want to just stick with one cloud and lower complexity, or are you willing to try to integrate multiple clouds and multiple services across multiple clouds to just make sure you're not locked in with a certain vendor? So also finding the right tool for your job. Each cloud has their own nuances and has their own benefits. You might like the email and Active Directory and Azure versus you want the AI and machine learning within Google, and you want the breadth of services within AWS. It all depends on your organization and what you're willing to do, and then how to access your warehouse in each cloud. For instance, Redshift is very tied in with your AWS ecosystem and your networking. It's going to take extra steps to bring in new services from the outside and allowing more complexity and security holes. So target warehouses. We're finally talking about where I can store my data in the cloud. And you have a lot of options. There's not one size fits all. There's not going to be one single answer. Each organization is going to have their own best case scenario. So Amazon Redshift. I know we talked about it. It is like the number one used warehousing tool in the world right now. So this would be with Spectrum, without Spectrum. So Redshift is a traditional warehousing tool. It is Amazon's solution for the warehouse in the cloud. It's very simple to deploy. One-click deployment, and it's ready within 5 minutes. It is designed to be, as they say, petabyte scale. It's going to have your shortest timelines. It's on demand, and you can scale on demand with their API. Spectrum is to allow you to have external tables in S3, kind of allowing you to augment a traditional warehouse with a data lake, as long as you can provide schema on top of that. So kind of gives you the best of both scenarios. We've definitely seen in our clients issues with parallelism and querying. So you are still scaling your compute with your storage. So you're not always going to be able to, if you need to scale up performance, you're going to scale your storage and your costs as well. You can't do it independently. Amazon Athena, it's a little different. It's totally serverless. It's essentially querying all your data that you have in S3. You're only paying for your usage, so the compute and reading of the data in S3, and then the storage costs as well. If performance is a key thing for you, it might not be the best solution. It's not going to be as performant as Redshift, for instance, if you understand your queries. But the cost of storing as much data as you want in S3 is much lower than if you want to load it into Redshift. Snowflake, it's a cloud agnostic tool, I guess. They're coming up with support for deployment on Google Cloud next year, I believe. But it's a true cloud warehouse. It's as a service warehouse. It decouples the storage and the compute. So it's index data on S3, and then you can spin up virtual warehouses to run your queries against, and you can have as many warehouses as you want. Essentially, you'd think of each virtual warehouse as a compute queue, and you can query the same data in S3 as much as you want, just because of the parallelism of S3. And it's a true petabyte scale warehouse, in my opinion. Then I thought I'd throw here a couple other options, depending if you are multi-cloud, and they are great solutions for cloud warehousing, is Google BigQuery. It's similar to Snowflake, I guess, that it is decoupled storage and compute, and you really can run as much parallelism as you need to. It is indexed data on Google Cloud Storage, which is like their solution to S3. It is similar paying as you do with Athena. You're paying for the compute and then the storage costs in Google Cloud. And those are your typical warehousing technologies. Then you have things like Hadoop or EMR and EMRFS if you're running that. So they enable you to not only do SQL, but to do Spark and other languages on top of that. EMR is your Elastic MapReduce, and EMRFS is allowing you to, instead of having to manage all the disks on your compute nodes for EC2 instances in this example, is to store it in S3. And then Aurora and Spanner, be AWS's Aurora and Google Cloud Spanner, is essentially a cloud vendor relational database. They've rewritten standard like MySQL or Postgres and really made it for the cloud, scaling across multiple, across the entire region, and giving you the more concurrency. Whereas if your storage is small enough, this might be a good solution. It's better than a single MySQL or Postgres, whether it be in RDS or in on-prem, and it gives you the simplicity of still being your standard warehouse standard tool. And so how did I get there? I've chosen the product I want to use. I want to use X, Y, and Z. How do I get there? You have a few options. You could use public internet if you have enough bandwidth and you're willing to pay for that. Or you can use Direct Connect if you have it. That comes in 1 or 10 gig connections. It's just depends on how much data you have. It can take a very long time to send over 300 terabytes, for instance, across a 10 gig connection, if you're willing to saturate that even at 50%. You have other options as well. You have Snowball. It's essentially a big boombox with like 80 terabytes and a little Amazon paper white on front of it as a screen. And you'd bring in your data center and plug it in, and you can load up 8 terabytes or how much you want. Send it back to Amazon, and they'll load it back in S3 for you. We've seen this be a big issue with getting companies to allow bringing a hard drive into the data center, plugging it in, and then loading data on it, and then shipping it back to someone. Companies usually don't like the idea of putting your data on some device and then leaving the data center. So that's been a wall at times when coming to clients. So Direct Connect might be a little faster in that regard. If you're willing to use your Direct Connect or your internet VPN connection to AWS, DMS is one option. Essentially, it simplifies the going from your source system to your target system. It works for Redshift or RDS, etc., and as a source of Teradata, as well as MySQL, Postgres, SQL Server, etc. And it can do the full load as well as the CDC changes over time, whether it just be a one-time thing and then picking up the changes and then turning it off and cutting over, or it can do replication continuously, allowing for an HA setup where if your application goes down on premise, you can fail over to the cloud, or vice versa. So real examples. I gave you some of the options of moving to the cloud. We've seen quite a few things happen at our clients. And it really depends on the scale at which you're working at. For very small organizations, we've seen just using daily DMS jobs to keep them in sync, to load from multiple source systems to one target, and then have all your data in one spot and enable querying on top of that. We've also seen the HA setup, where you have DMS jobs that are continually keeping the CDC changes in date, and then have a load balancer on premise to fail over when needed if the target system or the source system, on premise were to go down. We've also seen a very large scale when you have hundreds of terabytes and you want to keep them in sync, and you don't want to have to do a snowmobile, for instance, was the essentially a semi-truck of hard drives at I think 100 petabytes. I have no idea how much that costs or how it is you request one. I don't think you can do it through the council though. And just using your ETL tool to fork writes, to write to on-premise, but then also updating if it's modularized, hopefully, to just add a step to write to S3 and kick off a SQL statement from there. That allows you to continually update your current warehouse on-premise to keep everything in sync, and then to slowly cut over your applications going forward. This has been a very good approach. And then as well as having the idea to totally rewrite your ETL tool. We had a large company in the Chicagoland area. They wanted to go from Teradata to Redshift, but they also wanted to go from Informatica to Talend. So it was a huge timeline. They wanted to get it done before end of life of Teradata. And we were able to rewrite all their Informatica code into Talend, but we found shortly that the concurrency of Redshift at the time did not match that of Teradata. And I know they're changing. I know this is the AWS conference. I'm not against Redshift. I've deployed it this past week, but the concurrency doesn't always match. So that's why you're testing in your phased rollout to make sure that you're able to support it. We end up having to go through tons of changes to do monthly databases that we could vacuum and drop old ones and put the querying across so that we didn't max out the concurrency of Redshift. So those are a few examples. I mean, there's a lot you can do with these warehouses. You have a lot of choices. So what should I do? Is there a solution that works for me? I would say it really depends. Again, there's so many options we've gone over. There's no one size fits all, and things are always changing. As we said earlier today, Amazon's making changes every single day, and so are the other companies. It really just depends on what you want to do, what your current warehouse looks like, and what you want to do in the cloud. So, are there any questions? Okay. Yeah. Yep.
Database provider out there like Snowflake that offers the concurrency solutions?
There are, and I cannot think of any offhand. Snowflake is really very popular in the market right now. We've seen quite a few companies leveraging it. Some things to note, I think, is for Snowflake is all your data is stored with other companies. So sometimes that's not the most enticing thing to companies, especially if you're under certain regulatory issues. But there are other companies, and I'm sure there are others ones will pop up as well. But they're really the big leader as a cloud agnostic warehouse. Anything else? No? Well, if you have any questions, you think about it, feel free to stop me afterwards, and I'd be happy to talk about it. So, thank you.